these negative rooms. And with them monitoring these negative rooms, these people are being dismissed from the app and can't come back because the app is, fan base is about community. Fan base is about sharing. It's about giving love. It's about reciprocating. And if you don't reciprocate, you're going to see it because it's a payout every month if you make at least $25. But I've seen people and heard people that have just did nothing but post pictures and a little bit of commentary that made over $500 a month. Free money, just an extra stream of income. So it's easy. The only reason why I was talking to y'all about it so much because I seen the vision after seeing Isaac on Roland Martin's show. And the biggest thing about it that really intrigued me is his father, God rest the dead, was one of the first artists to actually have 100% royalties, 100% publishing, and 100% ownership of all his music. And other people followed him, and he just started at Stax Records in Memphis. So when he came to Atlanta, where Isaac Hayes III was born, and under the producer name of Ike Dirty, working on so many different labels here and with so many different artists, this man built him such a platform that he is still a person that is very not so famous. His father is well known still. He don't want to be known. He just want to help out the community and actually do more so we all can be sitting on the same level monetarily and financially.
Hey, Donald, do me a favor. Drop that info in the chat for me.
I will. I got you, bro.
I want to look it up again.
Not to mention, we got content, so maybe something that we can build his platform with.
And I'm already talking about fatherhood, and I let them know that we have over 100 and some videos on YouTube, and we do this every Tuesday at 7. And we also do the private informational sessions on Wednesday with Just Father. So yeah, let me get this to the chat, man. I keep coming in, I'm excited about everything that's going on with us and them.
All right. Well, listen, that was the pre-conversation that you guys out there in TV land got to see, but I want to welcome you to Fatherhood Think Tank. It is the most father-full 90 minutes that you'll ever get in a work day, in a week. And we do it twice a week, so once live and once private. Tonight we're going to be having a very interesting dialogue conversation, following up on some of the things that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. You know, last week we talked about paternal and maternal deaths. And so this week we're going to follow that up to kind of talk about finding yourself after losing a loved one. And that's our topic tonight. And so we're gonna go there, but then this is probably going to move into some other stuff because losing a loved one is not always through death. It's also some other ways in there to lose a loved one. So again, I want to welcome everybody to Fatherhood Talk, and let's hear from the Fatherhood Think Tank. Let's hear from these fathers and welcome them, and as we get this conversation started tonight.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I'm a father to a tribe of 7 young adults, 3 young women, 4 young men, and 1 granddaughter, and a wonderful wife. So you know what, from this point on, I'm gonna start out with my wife first and then work my way down. So that's my little tribe that's going on. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Good evening, everyone. Gerard Bernard, father of 2 young adults. Just glad to be here. Been missing for a minute. Now I'm back.
Philip Adams, father of 3 and 1 grandson.
Good evening, Donald Jones, father of 2, divorced father of 2, and soon to get married again. I'm about to get engaged, y'all. Love this platform, and please, it's going to be an important and informational day. Stay tuned.
So Donald, you transitioned. You used to be divorcing father of 2. Now you're a divorced father of 2. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm ready
it
to let
sound like he transitioning, gonna go from divorced father to divorced father to engaged Beyonce. That's what I heard the man say. Maybe I was mistaken. But let me just jump and say this. This is what we're looking for, and this is what we're talking about. That we don't have to stay in one place. You know, as fathers, we will travel throughout and have different titles in our relationship. So a great point there. Thanks.
Good evening, fathers. My name is Rohan Rodok. I'm a divorced father of two young ladies. As I always say, it's a pleasure being with the group, and iron sharpened iron. So everyone stay in tune. There's a lot to learn.
Anybody else? All right, with nobody else, let's get into this topic, gentlemen. As I'm thinking about this, I know that we are kind of following the trend of losing a loved one, and as you can see that the picture we have, I think Gene, when he seen the picture, he said, "Well, Gene, what'd you say the picture was? Being left behind."
I said, what is it? One man swings alone.
One man swings alone. But I think that when you look at our picture, he has his arms reached out, and it's funny how this picture is set up. It has the sun rise right on the missing seat of the person that's not there. And we're gonna, I think initially we're gonna talk about this in reference to death, but I think we can also talk about it in the reference of losing that person that we had a relationship with, and we were in a relationship with. You know, what happens there, and how does that play out? I know especially for the divorcing fathers, you can definitely speak to what it means and what it looks like to be that, as well as fathers who maybe just had a baby and never really had that relationship, and now that you're co-parenting or trying to co-parent with a mother, and you guys are completely away from each other, and so it can really play on what happens to us, how we perceive things, how we view things, how we even look at things. So let me throw it out there to you guys. Let me see what you're thinking, what your mind is about this idea.
Jay, you can go ahead and share that story you shared earlier about the young man you encountered, and I would follow up with what I was getting ready to follow up with.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, earlier I was sharing a story about a young man who I came in contact with, who's a new father. This is going to be his first child. And the mother of his child passed away during birth. And so, but the child was born prematurely, 25 weeks. So it was just an interesting thing, you know, to have the conversation that we had last week about in life, if you were put in that situation, which life would you choose to save, and all those other things. And leading up to what we're talking about today, I just find that you go into it, and I think when you have such a great loss like that, you become lost yourself, right? Because you don't know where to start. You don't know, because one thing is to lose your loved one, but it's another thing to even have your child not able to come back with you. So you know that child's still in a critical condition. So you have the potential to lose two people in one fell swoop. So I know that can weigh on you as far as, you know, what we're talking about with loss and grief. And so I just found that very interesting in how it played into the conversation that we're going to have today.
Oh yeah, and what I was saying is to encounter, or better yet, to have the conversation last week and encounter the situation this week. Just you talking about it, you just saying it because I had exposure to it, and I got to be careful between experience and exposure, right? Exposure. The reason it's exposure for me and not experience, because his situation is he lost the mother of his child at birth, with the possibility of losing his child, or with the possibility of having to raise his child who may be fully healthy or may not be fully healthy. And so he's getting an experience that he's no way, shape, or form equipped for. He's getting an experience. Just having a child by itself, or just having a child by itself is, or healthy child by itself. You understand? Nobody anticipates having a child with disabilities. You understand? So all the realities is hitting them at one time. And the reason I have to empathize with it is because my exposure to it. Now, the reason I don't call my experience an experience, I call it an exposure, especially in comparison to his situation, is because I lost the mother of my child when my son was graduating school. He was graduating in May or June, and she died in like April or May, like a month prior to his graduation. And so she was able to get him to adulthood, right? Get my son to adulthood. And this is what makes it exposure for me, even though it is an experience, but it's more exposure for me because she was able to complete a cycle, you understand? And get us through the times that, I mean, the most critical times that in a parent life, especially in the most emotionally and intellectual critical time, because nobody really has a master's degree or even a diploma of what it is to be a parent. And my son was her first child. And so once we lost her, and again, what makes mine exposure and his experience is because the level of sacrifice. He's getting ready to go into a sacrifice that I can't fathom. You understand? I know what it is to have my mother, the mother of my child, come home with my child. You understand? I know what it is to raise that child. I know what it is for that child to be healthy enough to be able to fend for himself. I know what it is to complete that cycle. His cycle is in emotion. He's going to need so much support. Let me say that first before I try some old therapy. I'm like, no, he's going to need more than therapy. Therapy is just one entity of what he's going to need. He's going to need so much support. I can't even fathom, even though I had the exposure, I can't fathom the level of support that this man is going to need just to say, you know what, to not give up on his child and not quit on what it's going to take for him to be the father that supersedes all of us together on here. You understand? Because that level of fatherhood, I don't think I can ever fathom. So I can't say, oh, I can really relate to it or I can empathize with it. I can just sympathize with it, but I can't empathize. And so with my situation and my exposure, the most I experienced in our situation and losing the mother of my child was too emotional, what they call it is emotional. With my son, we had an emotional bond, right? Because we had to experience, I had to tell him that he lost his mom. I'm the one who had to break the news to him. And I think he was just walking and waiting to hear it. He was okay. You know, it's something about, and if you lost anything, this is real for anybody that lost anybody, a mom, a parent, or whatever. It's not real until you hear it. It's not real until you find, somebody really convinced you. And it has to be somebody you trust. You just can't have any Joe Schmo telling you your mom dead. It doesn't work the same way. The news have to come from somebody that's intimate, that you trust, for it to be real for you. And for me, coming from me as his father, and I broke the news that his mother had passed. The minute he broke, I broke. So we experienced an emotional breaking first, right? Emotional breakdown first. You understand? In order for us to have an emotional bond. And I think that's an emotional bond that he'll take with him for the rest of his life. One of those experiences. And you know what? You want to emotionally bond with your kid, but you don't want to have an emotional break with your kid. And unfortunately, that's this topic actually, and I think it actually speaks to that because it's something we don't really expect. We think that bonding happens just one way. I'm like, no, bonding not just happen in life. Bonding also, unfortunately, take place in death. That's the conversation we're getting ready to have here. And Scott wanted to be one of the most intimate and the most vulnerable conversation a man or any human being should have. And so that's just my take.
You know, like boy, you say that so eloquently, but one of the things I think that's really, really important, and I think that so often that we as men, just as human beings, but really as men, don't really take the opportunity to grieve. So what has happened at this moment is that a child, everything is going to be focused on the child. Like what we got to do for the child, how everything is going to go. But at no point are people really going to take the time to let this father grieve the loss, because he got a lot of things to grieve. Now, don't get it twisted. The first thing is just the loss of the partner that he had. This lady was a partner. So this was somebody that he spent time with to get to the point to have a baby with. And now she's gone. That's just one aspect that he has to grieve. Now he has to grieve the idea that the plans they had together. He has to grieve what his plan was and how he was going to be a father, how she was going to be a mother, how that changes. He has to grieve the idea that, hey, I might have to get involved with somebody else to actually bring this child up. You know, the idea of, oh, if I'm going to re-involve myself with another person, you know, how did he explain to the child, you know, what happened to the mother? How did he handle? So there's so much grief, and then some people just saying, hey man, you just gotta survive and take care of this kid, Jack. And that's what people focused on. And at no time really being able to give the father the time, because if the father doesn't grieve appropriately, the child is not ever going to learn how to really grieve.
And you know, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to touch on that, Ron. Appropriate grieving. I think that's one of the things that men sometimes don't understand how to do. I think you get stuck inside the anger and not realizing you're stuck inside the anger. And it manifests itself in different behaviors, and you don't understand why, but it's because, again, though that process of the grieving it's not done the way it should be. You know, sometimes, and I know we spoke about it before, when it came to, you know, some of the other lives that we've done when it comes to the expression, and I think Lightborn touched on it a little bit, that breakdown. And it's okay for you to break down, because that's part of the grieving process. You see what I'm saying? Because you often, and just as a human being, period, you often try to replace something with something else so you don't have to grieve it as much, right? And so that's one of the things that we've got to understand, just that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to break down. It's okay to have that loss and feel that loss and really think about and process the loss, because that's the only way you're truly ever going to get over it.
I'm glad you said that, J. Rob. Go ahead, Lionel.
Oh, no, you're good. Go ahead.
I'm glad you said it. And to get back to Lionel's point at the very beginning, I think that is called a traumatic emotional experience, because it's something that y'all actually came to together that was singular about the whole situation. It was your queen that you lost, which was his queen, and she was a great woman to you, and y'all became great friends. I remember you sharing that the story about that, and rest in peace to her. That traumatic emotional experience can bond people for the wrong reasons, and it can bond you for the right reasons. And the only reason why I can speak about it, because I lost a child. And I know I spoke about this before, but as J. Rock said, we don't know how to properly grieve the situation, and we end up replacing this person and this love with something else. Sometimes you just never get filled, because I still deal with depression, and I just don't know how much it affects me, because when it comes to children, any children as well as my own, I want to protect them. I want to make sure they got everything they need. I want to make sure they got everything that I'm supposed to give them, especially the love and the protection that they desire to have and they don't know they need. But in order for me to I can't even say get over, because I never get over it. In order for me to process my son's death properly between me and his mom, it took me until 2015 when I met Coach Ron. And through his series of therapeutic measures, dealing with psychology, it helped me a whole lot, and it gave me a lot of tools that I can use later on in life and pass on to my children and other people that go through the same things. But the first thing I had to do was to actually go and seek help finally, because I was almost out of my mind when Coach went. I've been dealing with so many traumatic experiences throughout family, but my son had always been number one, because as we spoke about it, you said, Lionel, it's the dreams and the aspirations we have for our children. And once we go through this loss, or even with the people that we do lose, it's like, oh my God, I was thinking too far ahead. Why couldn't I just think about how to get to the next day, how to get to the next month, or how to deal with this as I'm going through these situations? That those hows never come up because you know your ambition, you know what you did when you were younger. And when you finally see another version of you 2.0, it's like, I want my child to be greater than me in any way I possibly can help them. I want to make sure that this child gets everything that they need. And if I got to sacrifice everything I have as a father, I'm going to do it. Because I was homeless at the time I met Coach Ron, but I still was taking care of my children. I actually had to go live with family members to help bring my children down so they could spend summers with me. But that put me in a point of saying, you know what, I have to do this at this point in time, but this is not going to last forever. But then when you actually dealing with that death and trying to process it through properly, it's always about how long it's going to last. And that's the hurting part of it, because you never know how long, but you have to seek help.
And I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking about, and again, I'm traumatized just hearing about what J. Rob said about the the young man situation, because when you're a father, it's real for you. You understand? I think every father on here, and there's a certain level of trauma that comes along with just hearing about that young man's situation. I wouldn't want that situation for anybody. You understand? Even people with the greatest support system, I still wouldn't want that situation for anybody, because to have your child and not have an idea, and to have to look forward to having a partner to raise, you understand? You understand? A partner to work with you. And we always know that relationships are work. But to see in his situation, the only thing I can hear right now, Ron, the only thing came to my memory, the closest I want to get to this, and I think it's Frederick Douglass that said, it's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. And what I am saying is this. Here's a man in a situation that personify that quote right there, Frederick. I mean, because you could think like, okay, you know what, broken men, we always think like, okay, a broken man is a situation that we brought on ourselves. You understand? And so when we see the thing, we think a broken man is a one-way street to being a broken man. That's not true. And so of this particular young man, he's in every predicament right now to be a broken man at no fault of his own. And so when we come across a young man, a young broken man like that, will we be able to empathize? Will a situation trigger our humility or our arrogance? You understand? And for me, when I heard it, all it did was became a reminder for me. So immediately, my empathy activated. And my humility, but it took the humility for the empathy to activate. And matter of fact, you can't even have empathy with no humility anyway. You understand? But I would never say something arrogantly, like, you know what, well, you can survive this, and that. I'm like, first of all, how am I tell him to get beyond something that I haven't even told him to deal with? And I think we're conditioned to get beyond things, you understand, that we're not conditioned to deal with. And so it's a very dysfunctional condition. You understand? Get beyond. I'm not get beyond what? I just been broken. You trying to tell me? I'm like, right now, I don't care who you are. If you broken on the field, if your leg is broken during a football game, they pulling you out of the game. You getting the necessary therapy before they can determine whether you can get back in the game to become the greatest success you can become. Well, that same thing applies to fatherhood and every other relationship in life. But I think men unrealistically and superficially are unconditioned to not really deal with the things that we're going through.
I think like one, it's a dismissive attitude. A lot of times men are geared to have a dismissive attitude because they're like you said, they're like, come on, man, deal with it. Get over it. You got other stuff you got to worry about, instead of actually going through what it is that you need to go through. And I think once you,
Gene,
yeah.
But what if nobody's willing to help you do that? What if, and I think this is a big part. I one time I was telling some women in a conversation is that you may think a man, the biggest honor a man could ever give you is to vent with you. Not to tell you sexy, to lay it down on you, or when this man is willing to vent to you, and allow you to see his vulnerability, that means he trusts you and that you are a woman that he has respect for. Now, what you do with it is a whole nother story. But you won't get very many men to do that, because most men are gonna, like you said, we are kind of conditioned to be, listen, I'm a soldier, I'm a rider, I'm a dyer. None of this affect me. Even though then he popping pills, he drinking beer all day, he watching all the Pornhub, he going down to the strip club giving all the dollars, but he good. And look, I'm good. This don't affect me. I'm not affected by any of it.
And you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that's an important fact that you have to lay out. That the quickest way to shut someone down, and especially a man down, is when he expresses himself, and the way you treat it will either get him to express himself again or to never talk to you again. Those are the two things. And I think that, and I'm not trying to and this goes whether you're in a group of guys or you're talking to your significant other.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. Great point.
How the guys around you handle your grief will speak volumes on whether you can actually use them to process anything else. And once you feel you can't talk to them, you can't talk to your loved ones, you can't talk to your spouse, your girlfriend, whoever it is, you start to shut down. And then people wonder why you changed. But it's not that you've changed, it's that you can't process. Because sometimes the best way to process is to talk about it. And if I'm not allowing you to talk about it, then I'm just allowing you to fester inside your own grief. Because what happens with that is, once you start to internalize and you try to shove it down, in a sense, then you start to replace it with other habits. Like Ron said, you're going out, you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to be affected by this. I'm just going to go here. I'll be at the club. I'll be drinking. I'll be doing whatever else it takes for me to get over whatever I have to get over. But it's not truly processing. It's like we were saying, you're just replacing it.
Oh, Ron, I mean, you triggered something, Ron, when you said that. Ron, I don't know why you be bringing stuff up. But anyway, I'm going to share this. There's about 3 women in my life that saw me cry, particularly as a man. One was my mom. The second one was the mother of my child who passed away. And the third one was my wife. My wife got to see me cry when my mom passed away. You know, so she comforted me on that. I think what made me and the mother of my son who passed away, my youngest son who passed away, what made me and her have a special bond is because the mother of my oldest child, we was going through some kind of conflict, and then it went into the courts, and then it got volatile. I mean, it got so volatile. Me, I really wasn't trained. I don't even say trained. I just wasn't emotionally prepared to be dealing with have like a court indictments and stuff like that. That was, I want to say indictments, but allegations that wasn't true. And so for me, the way I express myself, if something not true about me, I'm a very universal person. And so you're not going to get no special treatment because it's the courts. If it's a damn lie, we'll call it a goddamn lie. Court or no court. And that's what happened. And so I flipped out in the court, and the judge told me I couldn't see my son for a year. I'll never forget it. And so they took me out to court, cussing everybody out, of course. I mean, I can't see. I'm like, listen, I'm from the hood. I'm hood raised, and not to mention, and that's what. And it's not the lack of intelligence, because people are like, oh, the lack of intelligence. I'm like, listen, you don't get to dictate how I control my anger. Matter of fact, don't even tell me.
And let me say this, like, boy, I'm going to say this because you said it, and I want to be very clear. It doesn't have to be anger. Right. It could be. This is the problem. We got to lust up this idea, and we see this in the court all the time. Any passion, emotion, sympathy, sorrow, it's all seen as anger.
Correct.
And if you laugh, you insane.
Correct.
You crazy insane if you laugh. So we have to remember that those kind of things is what's given to us you know, so much. So I just, as you said, I just wanted to throw that in there, that about that.
And so what
being able
happened
to be
was
angry.
after that, let me finish this up though. What happened was, after all that was over, because, you know, eventually they stamped it like, you know, I done flipped out in the court. They done stamped it. I can't see my son for a year. And so I get home. And when I get home, you know, and again, as angry as I was, right? When I got home, that fatherhood kicked in for me. And all I did was just flopped out on the bed and start crying. And I can always remember this. I never forgot this. And I think this just made us a stronger, because even after me and her broke up, she was like one of the best friends I ever had in the world. And I remember her when we was as a couple, when I got home and I laid across the bed and I just started, you know, crying, I can remember all she could do was she just laid on top of my back and started crying with me. I never forget. And it's those type of things that I think we don't share. And because we don't share it with men, we don't show them. But what I just shared with you is really this showing guys, because we can always talk about what guys don't do, but the reality is nobody's really showing them how to do it because nobody's really sharing their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to tell you that, because I had to share that story, because that was one of those intimate moments and one of those vulnerable moments that, as mad as I was and ready to give my life, you understand the fact that this man said he had the power for me not to see my son that I was taking care of. You understand? That really hurt me, and in certain instances, and it kind of broke me. And her laying on my back and just crying with me actually built me to actually tolerate that. And not seeing my son for a year, and so to the mother of my sons, I was going through it at that time point, she had a great husband. He just didn't know how to be the only man without having to compete with this man. Because unfortunately, she still had feelings for me at that particular time. And he really loved her. I can truly say that part I always respect. I'm like, no, I had to grow up to really understand his love for her. And it actually taught me how to love my wife. I said, no, you never take nobody's word over your wife. I don't care if she's lying. And he was that type of man. That part I love and respect about him. I had to grow to where he was at that particular time. And so it was a dangerous dispute to be in, because here we are, two men who he loved his wife and I love my child. And we're getting ready to go to war and possibly take each other's life for two things that matter: his wife and my child. You understand? And no amount of court can actually measure it. And I think even in that court at that particular day, even that white judge saw in my eyes like, this man is ready to die. So I think it's best we just get him out there as quick as possible before it turns into something else. And at that particular time, even Martin Luther King said, man, if you can't find something to die for, you're not fit to live. That's a peaceful man talking. But that's a very necessary man that she's talking to. And you ought to know that just instinctively. And so that was one of those intimate moments that bond me and the mother of my child before she passed. I'm talking about to the point that her and my wife had an awesome relationship with no suspicion or nothing. Me and her husband had a great relationship with no suspicion, never suspicion, like, oh, we hanging out. Even when we hung out, nobody was suspicious of anything, because that's the relationship we had. We had to grow into like brothers and sisters. And you would think we were brothers and sisters, that's the way we got along. So, I mean, those intimate moments, showing and sharing and showing sometimes. And most of the times the guys don't have the example to really know what it is to navigate hurt and the traumas that we go through as men and fathers. That's all I'm saying.
And to add to that, you know, Ron mentioned something just very important. I usually say to students, hunger and thirst. The body sends that signal, and most people will go and eat, but sometimes they're thirsty, right? It's just that close, because it doesn't send a signal to one area. But let's talk about anger and grief. For most African Americans, it is perceived that they are angry. That's the first thing, especially for African American male, and how we behave. Anger is the first thing that comes out in the public, but most times we're grieving. So how could we grieve versus anger? Because it's like one side of the knife on the other side of the knife. It's so close. How would you guys look at that in terms of grief versus anger?
Well, you know, anger is one of the stages of grief. And it's a matter of you understanding that, because the anger comes from the fact that of the loss. And it's once you start to process, once you start to understand how to process going through the stages, because the first one is denial, right? you can't believe it happening. And I think that plays to what Lightborn was saying earlier, that it depends on who tells you that something occurred is how fast you're going to believe it, right? And in his situation, because it was him going to his son, it came from such a credible source that it couldn't be denied. You see what I'm saying? So he got to move from that stage a lot faster to the anger stage, right? Now, the anger is not so much that you're mad at the situation. You're mad at the person that left, right? In a sense of they're no longer going to be there. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the anger stage, and that's why you have it so close, like you said, Rohan, that it's on like a knife. And so once you start to understand how to move from anger, right, towards the acceptance of it, that's when you start to realize, why you're angry. Because a lot of times we walk around angry at the fact of the loss, but because we're processing it so poorly, it becomes anger to society, anger at society, anger at everybody who comes our way, right? Because we haven't learned to focus on what our anger is really triggered by. And I'll say, and I don't want to go too far off skew, but that anger process and that stage of grief comes with everything you do in life, right? It's just equated just to, the actual death, but it's also equated to the loss of, like, I know Don was on here earlier talking about he was homeless. He went through the stages of grief with that homelessness. So it doesn't play itself only towards life and death, but it also plays itself in different arenas. And we have to understand that. And we have to deal with those stages in all aspects in which it comes, so that we can manage that anger and move it on to acceptance, so then we can then process and move further on with all the other stages of grief.
Okay. Yeah, with that said, just to add, we know that in Broward County, where I reside, we have a high rate of African-American males committing suicide. And as Ron mentioned, losing a loved one, there are many different reasons why men will commit suicide. Well, obviously, they may not have a area to vent their feelings, which again can turn from grief to anger to suicide. So our goal as fathers is to I would believe to reach out to anyone who's going through this transition. And as you mentioned, you spoke to the young lad. If we are not going to solve every problem, but we can find a solution. Maybe you could invite him to the program where he because I can just imagine I had 5 miscarriages, and mind you, miscarriages is not a fully developed child, but it's a heartbeat, so to speak. So that trauma, we're here for everyone to walk along with that person until they can get back on their feet, and hopefully it doesn't manifest into anger, because grief is bad. Grief is tough. It's a tough bridge to cross. So they also have 211. I've used them in the past to I wouldn't say to put my grief on them, but I've communicated with 211, and they're a good resource. So I just want to put that out there, because we advocate for children, whether they're preemies, whether whatever stage they come into this world. That's what this group is about. So I just want to put that out there. Yep.
It's interesting that you said that about the suicide, because that does come along with the stages of grief when it comes down to the depression. And it's something that's frequently happening also more often within the society. And I think that also has to be shifted towards making sure we're watching our children and helping them manage their stages, because kids are committing suicide at a larger rate now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. And I think it's I don't want to blame social media, but it's the more exposure that they're able to access that plays a role and how they process what they think their life is. And I think that's important that we pay attention to that, because if we're not paying attention to our kids and they're going through their grief, and again, grief happens in many different aspects of our life. So we have to understand that. And children won't process like we do, and we won't process like children do. So it's just a matter of also watching them and making sure that they're not stuck in that depressive state and thinking of suicide.
You know, I'm glad you brought it up, because this is the time I'm going to defend social media in some regards. Here, let's walk this path. Depression and anxiety is common. It's on the rise for many different reasons, economic reasons, homelessness, and nutrition wise, and there's so many reasons. But let's do this. There's an old saying that says the world smiles with you and you cry alone, right? So let's do the maths here. We know that most of the children are maybe depressed, maybe in the household. So we know that majority, if Snapchat or TikTok was to put a video on where someone is crying, they would disappear, because nobody wants to watch a video where someone is crying day after day after day. So I believe some of these social media, I don't have any, but I go on there when I get a chance. They are using these social media as a coping mechanism, as something to make them smile, as something to look at that person. That person is happy. Why can't I be happy like that person? But most times this depression has to do with the environment, in my opinion. Maybe it's home, maybe it's school. There are many factors that is forcing, that I believe is affecting our children and our adults. So we really have to delve in and see why these children and adults are committing suicide. It affects everyone from what I'm seeing.
Remember this: if I had to really explain social media, or my observation of social media, is this, and particularly with our children, but with adults too. I see it in both. The more exposure given, the more acceptance needed. I'll say it one more time. The more exposure given, the more acceptance needed. Simply put, everybody you expose yourself to, you're going to need some acceptance from, because you're going to get some validation. And guess what? Be it somebody give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down, a good response or a negative response, a response is still a response, and every response counts. Now, don't ask me why the negative accounts, the negative responses count more than the positive, because you can have 100 positive response and 1 negative response. And I've seen educated people do this. And what do they respond to? The damn negative responses. And which, for the life of God, common sense tells me, I'm like, hey, you just got 100 positive response. Why are you giving valuable attention to the negative responses? And I've seen some of the best and brightest do it. And so that lets you know that if grown-ass educated people can't handle that kind of peer pressure, what you think about your children? And so I can't put that kind of responsibility on my child to be able to handle something I seen an educated adult can't handle. And which means that social media simply shouldn't have been for kids in the first place, because you should never give adults access for kids. We don't give adults access to kids in our real life, in our real spaces. You know why? Because every adult would have to be vetted and make sure they go through a level 1 and 2 background check before they can actually be around kids. And so when it comes to that, I don't even understand. I think we do a lot of contradiction of our laws and a contradiction of policies and a contradiction of our lifestyle to say, well, you know what? Our kids can't be around this, but they can be around that on social media. You understand? And so I'm like, if they can't be that in reality, you can't be around that in social reality. A reality is still a reality, and you'll find out more time they have more access to social media or fantasy people on social media than they have the real people in real life. I'd rather them deal with real peer pressure, you understand, and the reality of it than social media, because now that person got access to you 24 hours a day, hitting you with all that negative response. And if your child is not strong enough, that can actually break your child. That's the dangers of social media, or anybody having that type of exposure. So it's not so much the social media, it's the exposure of your child to social media that's the danger to your child.
I'm on board.
You have to look also at the algorithms of social media, right? So it's not that, Rohan, it's not that it goes away when you're looking at someone crying on social media. It's that because you didn't interact with that post and look further into it, you won't get any other posts like that. It's going to go to what you are liking, and it's going to start showing you more videos or more content within that realm, right? And so if you start to say, you know what, I see this person talking about depression, I'm going to start looking at what they're talking about, you'll start getting more things about mental health.
Mhm.
But the minute you stop searching for mental health and you say, oh man, that cat's funny, let me go watch more, let me look at this cat, you know, jumping on this screen, then you're going to get more film about cats and the funny things cats do. So it plays into what you're doing. And that's how social media works. So it's used, that's why they call it a rabbit hole. Because once you get stuck on one thing, it shows you another thing and another thing. And all of a sudden you're like, yo, I've been on this thing for an hour and a half, looking at 3-minute clips. You see what I'm saying? But 3 minutes adds up when you're doing 50 clips. So you have to, and that's the thing. So once your kids start looking at certain things on social media, you got to realize that's what's going to populate their timeline.
Right.
So we have to be a little bit more stringent when it comes to what our kids are watching, what our kids are doing, and not even stringent, but we have to be aware, a lot more aware of what they're doing, because every kid that walks around with a cell phone is walking around with a computer in their pocket. And that's what we got to remember.
And I'm glad you brought it up, because in Broad County we have a lot of single mothers here, and single fathers, and we know that most times, if in both cases, a child is given a tablet or a phone, and it can be given to occupy their time, to not let them want to just keep them at one place. And I like what you say, that you're giving the child a computer 24/7 to have that child not focus necessarily on parenting time, but focus on the computer. But what is the child watching on the computer? So that's a valid point you just made. Maybe we as parents, we gotta look into more, what are they watching, and maybe have some form of security, so they can limit certain pages, so to speak.
How about if you spend more time engaging your child with that actual device? See, one of the biggest problems I think we have is that we use these devices as a getaway from our children. If everything we did, like even I'm teaching in this class right now, everything I'm doing now is through the cell phone. The kids keep saying, why everything got to come through the cell phone? Why we got to do our work on the cell phone? So now they're getting like, well, I don't want to use it. I mean, but that's allowing me to be connected to them, because that's what they're doing more than anything else. They go on something, and then bing, I show up and say, hey, did you do your assignment? That becomes like, oh man, this cell phone business is becoming, not just for fun. It's for the work that it do. And I think that's what, Gene said, is the kids are walking around with it in their pocket, but they're only using about 3% of it. They're only using 3% of the resources and things they can use the phone for. And that 3% of it is most of the stuff we don't want them to really be involved with or know about.
Well, to keep in mind too, that blue light can affect their eyes, and it can affect both adults and children eyes. So I think they recommend 2 hours per day. I'm not sure. I don't want to. That's what they recommend. But we are seeing more than 2 hours per day. We are seeing kids on the phone and adults on the phone. We could say actually maybe 8 to 10 hours per day. So we got
You know how much you're on the phone, Rohan? You can just go right on your left phone and see your usage. It tell you. I look at it all the time. And I say, I got to slow this down. And it lets you know what you was using, what you was doing.
Yep.
But that to do that means that you will be conscious of what we're doing, and we want to regulate and manage what we're doing. See, when we just forget about it, we don't have to worry about that. Like you drunk 6 sodas today.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost a gallon. I mean, that's a 2 liter. You drunk a 6-pack of sodas a day. That's a 2 liter at the most point. But right. You ain't keeping track. If you put the cans up on your shelf every time you drunk them, then you know how all these cans came from. That's right. What you drunk today. And those are kind of things when we're even dealing with our kids in that capacity, is even using that kind of time this year, but also, as I say, for those who plan to teach, come the sacrifice of being the teacher. So a lot of parents might not want to teach and guide because then they have to also sacrifice some of the major things that they feel like they might not want to sacrifice.
So with that said, you know, we have schools, we have school curriculum there, they're trying to pass grades. Is that something you think we should look into schools to teach, to talk about grief? Maybe that's something, you know, I think one
Well,
mentioned.
let me tell you something about grief. So me, Johnny, and Vaughn was at the saving him helping him program, right? We went to that program. And Johnny had just, you know, he was sharing that they had just at his school lost one of the kids. And he was trying to figure out what he was going to do Monday when he came to school, because he needed somebody to be there to deal with the kids, because this child had illness and the child passed away. And so how traumatic that's going to be to all, not just the kids in it, but everybody in the school, because this child was there and now they're not going to be there. And you know, and you have to acknowledge that people might go to the funeral. And so you got that, you know, you're looking at those kind of things when you're talking about grief. But we have to recognize that there is grief. You know, there are people that call us resilient and say we don't need to have no grief. We're resilient. We love death. We can accept death. And listen, I'm just telling you, Lightboy know it. Lightboy, that's why Lightboy gets so mad about these things, because it's almost dehumanizing us in many instances. And you have to really think about it. When someone said, "Oh, you're resilient," that means that I'm resistant to anything, so I shouldn't have any feelings about anything. Anything can happen. That's a trope from slavery. It's a trope from slavery.
Mm-hmm.
They don't got no feelings there. Oh, listen, you cut his testes off. It won't matter because he's just a steer, you know, just a item. And when really it does. It does have an effect. So we have to be also mindful about that, and us, you know, passing that type of behavior down to our children, not letting them to. Now, I don't think that you should let your kid be too emotional. They need to, you know, I think there's a level to emotionality and what they need and feeling, because I also think they need some toughness in them. But I'm not going to say that they could take everything. Some things kids can't take because we couldn't take it. That's why some of the problems we got is because we took it when we was kids, and now we don't know how to socially adjust as adults.
You just said it 100%, Ron. When it comes to dealing with grief and trauma with Black people, I think the adults are conditional, and I think young people deal with it superficial. And so we deal with it conditionally, and they deal with it superficially. This is why you can see with us dealing with it conditionally, adults, we are shut down, or we'll grieve privately, right? And so we have a way and a time and a place to grieve. We don't grieve outwardly, we don't grieve publicly. We just grieve privately, and particularly as men, as opposed to young people, when they deal with the trauma, they deal with it superficially. This is why they have the T-shirts and the parties and they doing it more so, not so much to appreciate the person who's dead, you understand, but to actually elevate them through the grief. You understand? And it's not about the person who did, it's about me. It's an opportunity for me to be seen. And so I got on the T-shirt, and I can buy the biggest balloons and this and that and all these flowers and crap, you understand, when you may have not had any connection to that person. And the persons who have real connection to that person is suffering in silence, right? And so this is where the resilient part comes in. So we expect it to be traumatized in this country. You were slaves, and everything we throw at you, you should be used to it by now. So this is why when we push back and say, no, we're not used to this, stop. This is not going to happen anymore. You understand? As a people. Then the culprits and the villains say, how dare you? You've taken this stuff so long. Why change it now? I'm used to you being the sad one. I am used to you being the traumatized. Okay. See, that's what, when it comes to Black people in this country, I am used to you. You understand? We are used to you being hurt. And so when everybody get their justice, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be the LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. The minute Black people push back and say, okay, stop, enough. You understand? And we get, how dare you say enough or determine when enough is enough. I seen that in a story in LA Times about, the story was a poll was taken and a majority, a high majority of the poll say they don't think Black people deserve, not deserve, but should get monetary reparations. I'm like, well, if reparation ain't monetary, what the hell is it? That's first. And I'm like, well, shit, we didn't take a poll to be enslaved. Why we have to take a poll to get paid? You understand? And so sometimes I think, not sometimes, all the time, because I think that's the problem. See, we was complaining about it sometimes. We were saying enough sometimes when we should have been saying enough all the time. And the fact that we wasn't saying enough all the time make it think that we okay with it sometimes.
Like, boy,
And that's the problem for me.
Don't get me started, please.
And
Please, like, boy, don't get because
You know what, we're stuck in the grief as a Black culture. We're stuck in our grief of bargaining.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We're bargaining still as Black folks.
Right.
If you give me this, then I can do this, and I'll be better.
Instead of using the law that sets the precedence. The precedence is that you gave reparations to the slave owners. That's the precedence. You said that they were being held disadvantaged. So where's all of that? That's all. Use the precedence. But a lot of times, Gene, you said it so eloquently that a lot of times we are so bogged down in the grief that we can't even be rational to even think precedence. Because the precedence is just how do we feel? How is it if that were okay? You know, you hear people asking, are you okay? You okay? Now, listen, you ask me if I'm okay, I probably don't tell you okay. But if you say, if I say, you want to know for real, they probably gonna keep on walking. They know it's about to go down.
Absolutely. But that's the thing. I mean, it's like, you know, you can't, and unfortunately, slavery and segregation denied us even our right to grieve. You understand? Because when you put a workload on somebody and you give them, and you put an expectation on them that you didn't give them the reparations or the real, situation to really be equitable or accountable. As a matter of fact, you don't even see them equal anyway. And so how does somebody who's not deemed equal really grieve? You understand? You can see this play out when in domestic violence situation, when women are expected to still be the wife under that type of violence, and under that type of still be a wife and a mother under those type of circumstances. And somehow she have to depend on her reason. Back to this word resiliency, which is an animal instinct. You understand? And for you to have to depend, and this is where it becomes an insult to me. For you to compare or better admire, of all the things you can admire about me as a human being, you admire my animal instinct. And you think my animal instinct is something to value in me as a human being. Do you see resilience like that? For before you throw that crap around and insult Black people or anybody with that, particularly Black people, indigenous people, or even poor people, they're so resilient. I said, in order for us, if we have to be reduced to resilience, that means there's a level of injustice that you don't want to admit to. So we're not having a real conversation. We're just having a one-way conversation that I'm not going to sit here and tolerate. And you do have that right to not have to tolerate certain things since we're in an all-inclusive culture now. That's what we're supposed to be on with the inclusivity and all that stuff. Right. Inclusivity until I call you on the top.
Right. Can we all just get along?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's basically just shooting you straight to acceptance. You know what I'm saying? You got to accept everything. And the worst thing, and dismissiveness is like one of the worst things that you can do to somebody, right? And that's exactly what they're doing to Black people as a whole. It's dismissive. You know what? And we've talked about it before that slavery should be on the DSM, right? Because it carries on. And because your parents didn't get to grieve, it carries on to the next generation who doesn't get to grieve, which carries on to the next generation that doesn't get to grieve. But we still are suffering the same injustices, and you just have to accept it. Don't fight it. Don't mess up the system. Just accept it. And I think that's the thing that a lot of times people don't understand is when you start talking about that level of acceptance without being able to process everything else that's coming your way, it's never going to happen. It's just going to carry on to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation.
No, it's not, because you know why it's not going to happen? Because me, you, Ron, and everybody we know, we're going to stop it at every conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you, first of all, you're not going to say, you're not going to impose or take away my right not to grieve. That's number one. So basically what he's saying is you don't have a right to grieve. That's number one. And number two, if you do grieve, how do we make money off? That's what makes mental health so dangerous for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. Again, a rapist can't be my therapist. You understand? You can't be my rapist and my therapist. I always say that. It just can't be.
Well, they can be. They can start off.
Again, I'm like, not for me. And again, when you in these forums and stuff like that, you call them on the carpet. I'm like, again, I'm like, they don't want to. I'm like, listen, you know not to invite me. FIU invited me and paid for it. You understand? But they paid, but they learned. They learned something because everybody in the room, I'm like, no, when you got real people in the room, real minds, real freedom in the room, everybody gets to think for themselves. And so you don't get to say something and think, I'm like, I'm going to challenge you every step of the way. If I don't see some inclusivity of who I am in this, you're talking about my trauma, but you're not talking about the triumphs of my trauma. And then in certain instances, you want to take credit for the triumphs of our trauma. Hell no. If you don't understand it, then you need to sit your ass in this seat and let me get up there and teach you something. And we need to stop accepting the fact that other people are coming in and teaching us how to deal with our trauma and not taking accountability for causing or historically causing our trauma. That's an insult. And so I'm like, man, you better be the right everything up there when you get up there talking about you're gonna teach me something. I'm like, because guess what? Accountability is not just on the damn teacher, it's on the learner too. And until we understand that, we're never going to be good members and productive members of society. I'm like, man, you better be just about an accountable learner as it is a teacher to one day that you look forward to challenging your damn teacher.
Yeah, I like that, like Bernie. I've always said in the medical field, a responsible doctor and a responsible patient give a responsible outcome. Now we know one of the things we talk about depression, and I say this to my daughter, you have to learn to love yourself first. And mind you, history, our goal is not to repeat history. Our goal is to learn from history and to make the future better. And as a people, we have to, we talk about porn control and people mention that in relationships, in domestic violence, but it's actually in our day-to-day lives. It's in traffic, it's on the job, it's everywhere. And some of these behaviors, narcissistic behavior, manipulative behaviors, we need to teach our children how to identify these behaviors. Because you have a set of skill that can see these behaviors and you respond. Are you with me? Where there are many people who they don't see it. They don't even know it's around them. And that's something we need to teach our children and teach our folks, that we need to, it's not necessarily acceptable because it's for control. And that's something we need to address. Food for thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Ron, I'm like, hey, Ron, how you going to, you're a clutch player. You're going to come in with the great comments.
Well,
You're a clutch player, ain't you?
I don't want to get us off base, but
No, you're on point. I greatly appreciate everything you just said. And Ron, I'm gonna have to put on my gas bar hat. Ron, you at time.
Right, exactly. Right, we right at time. Right, we started a little bit late, but we got right up. We caught right up to the place we need to catch up to, and so I know that was a big part of it. I mean, I would say this conversation tonight was enlightening. I think that we will definitely sum up a lot more of this tomorrow night when we meet in the Fathers Only group. I just want to at least leave opportunity if anybody wants to say anything before we get ready to close up, before we close house. But if not, you know, it has been a very I hope that people who have been listening, and if you watch this in the rerun and the replay, you really got something, because I think that there was some important factors to be able to hear about, you know, how to kind of deal with these idea of how men might be grieving in situations of loss, and what happens to us and why we might not grieve and why you might feel that we should grieve, and what that teaches us for what we need to do with our children. So I say all that, put that into place. Again, we enjoy and we welcome you to join us in the Fatherhood Think Tank every Tuesday night. And we definitely want fathers to come on Wednesday night to the Fatherhood Think Tank Man Cave conversation. With that being said, I want to thank all the fathers for joining us tonight. And Father, repeat after me. I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
Man of honor.
I am.
I
I
am.
I am.
I
am.
am.
I am a man of courage.
I am
a man
dedicated.
of courage.
Come on, Father. I say I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a man of respect.
I am a man of respect.
Fathers, I say that I am.
I am.
I say that you are.
You are.
I say that we are
We are.
championship
Championship
brothers.
LJ and Elder Thomas not here. I can get the title tonight.
You get the title tonight, right? Exactly. Exactly. So again, thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you here tomorrow night. A Fatherhood Think Tank Cave, Man Cave, private conversation, fathers only. But if not, you can definitely join us back here on YouTube and watch us live during the Fatherhood Think Tank conversation.
Yes.
Thanks everybody for joining tonight, and we'll see you all here either tomorrow night or next week. Fatherhood Think Tank.